usually SMBs. We have some enterprises that we're working with as well, and some startups that we support through the process. Usually those are startups that have funded already, all basically startups that we're developing MVPs for, and we help with the fundraising, we help in terms of the white papers, pitch decks, with the investors meetings and things like that. This service we do not provide only ourselves. We have a network of partners where we're basically trying to give this full experience to our clients and make sure that we can not only provide value through the engineering. We grow pretty fast in essentially a life cycle of the company. We grow at least 3 times each year, except the last one. And this year it looks very, very promising as well. In terms of myself, I'm the iOS engineer, iOS software engineer in the first place. So I used to develop applications for iPhones. And this is basically how the company started in the first place, from me freelancing and developing iOS mobile apps. Right now, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Interexy, and we have some information about my blockchain activities as well, which is essentially not the topic of this webinar. So in terms of the webinar, what to know about mental health software development, we will basically share the intelligence that we got from working on the products where we were developing mental health care solutions, not only mobile applications, but web applications as well. We had projects where we were developing the whole solution from scratch, basically just from the concept, giving a lot of feedback in terms of the product, in terms of the functionalities, in terms of the approach to the market, in terms of the target audience and the focus, and different marketing activities as well. And at the same time, we also had projects where we were basically providing engineers and specialists from our end. Most of the management was on the end of the client from the engineering part, and obviously from other parts as well. So a lot of things to share on that too. We will start with the guidelines to follow when building mental health software, audience specific, compliances, solution quality, and UI UX. We do not start from this for no reason. Just 2 hours ago, I was on the call with a client of ours about basically product which did not follow certain compliances and has a fine of multiple millions of dollars because of that. So it's a very, very important part to make sure to have on your solutions, to take care of, and basically implement and check on as well. So in terms of audience specific, if we're talking about mental healthcare solutions development, you might be working with a very, very specific type of audience. There are some mental healthcare applications that are basically focused on general audience, general public. It might basically be only focused on them and not tap into like a certain type of the audience that are specifically getting certain type of medical treatment through the applications like that. However, we do also have cases where we were developing telemedicine solutions for treatment of specific patients with specific types of requests from their end, and even with medical providers on that end with specific type of experience to be able to treat that patients as well. And the more focused we are, the more changes when developing the product you would basically have in terms of the UI UX, in terms of the engineering, in terms of the functionalities, in terms of the approach to the marketing as well, and in terms of the approach to running the application too, because basically just build out the application, it's only the first step. It's often mostly about the support, new functionalities, new versions, and how you react to the feedback from the market. Compliance is a very important part. I've mentioned the thing about multiple millions of dollars in fines. It's essentially a very, very general and important point for any healthcare software development. However, in mental healthcare, we have certain treatments and parts where we have to treat things in a certain way, because we have some specific changes which I would cover later on the webinar as well. Quality of the solution, standards on the market are very, very high currently for each application if we are speaking about mobile app. In healthcare, it depends on what type of solution you're basically developing, because if it's like business specific, for example, if it's like an application like a telemedicine app for a clinic, or certain internal application like ERM system, or basically a system to store the data of patients, which is internal, and basically just speed up the process of being able to operate on a daily basis for the employees in the medical business. You might have lower standards in terms of the quality and UI UX, because people would use this application anyway, because they basically need it to either receive the service faster or operate on a daily basis. However, if it's a product for the general market, where it's a certain mental health care application, default theme, very basic one, would be a meditation app. Like if we will go into that industry, into that segment of the market, the competition in terms of smoothness of the application, in terms of the quality of the UI UX, in terms of the performance of the application, how the app works and looks, is very high right now. So these are the points that should definitely be considered when even thinking about the market that you would like to tap into. In terms of the UI and UX, mentioned several times already, and it also depends on the target audience and basically on the specific audience that you would be going for. Because I think everyone would agree, if it's a text application like Uber or Lyft, and if it's specifically the application for the service providers on the system, it won't require like a very high level of quality, a very high level of smoothness of animations, because people, they would use it anyway because they make money through the application. And now we will dive deeper into the audience specific part, which is about target market feedback, analytics, and care. So in terms of the target market, as mentioned, there are like a range of markets and a range of audience that you can target based on geolocation, based on demographics, based on the application of your solution, and even a certain sphere in the healthcare, and even like certain diseases and treatments that you would basically like to provide through the service as well. And depending on all these variables, the solution should be carefully planned in advance, usually through the preparation of software requirements, professional software requirements specification, where you would have most of the parts of the solution outlined. And it's not going to be a waterfall type of approach, because we want to be agile, especially when developing the product from scratch, because we would work a lot with the market feedback, with the feedback of the test groups of the users as well. And we want to be able to make sure we can do changes in the process, we can tweak things a bit, and often small tweak in the process gives a lot of value to the whole product. So in our process, for example, we make sure that with SRS preparation, we focus on the general overview of the product, we focus on the first sprint of the solution, and then during the process, we continue to work on SRS in parallel with the engineering process and with the QA process as well. So we basically focus on the upcoming sprint, having the full picture in mind as well, to make sure that we can utilize agile development. And at the same time, we fixate everything that's going to happen in the current sprint as well. So our upcoming 2 weeks of development, no changes, only the things that we've planned beforehand. Market feedback is something which is very important for any type of the product development. Here in mental health care development, it also has certain implications that you definitely would need to be aware of. If we're talking about the audience that is sensible to certain things, because it requires certain treatment in the process, it might be very important to really listen to those feedback. And I would say that the job of the product owner of the company who's working with the market feedback and planning new functionalities of the product based on the feedback from sensible audience, it definitely has a higher level of difficulty than basically a general job of any product owner in a different company. On top of that, you would have a lot of issues with compliances, with things, with data optimization, storages, communications, and things like that. So it's a huge part of work as well. And a complexity of the market feedback, I would say, also depends on the sensitivity of the audience, because if it's a general public, if it's basically a meditation type of application, then process would be pretty similar to each and every other development of the product. And basically at the same time, you would want to enter the cycle of getting feedback from the potential users of the product sooner, not at the time when the product is on the market already, but during the development already. So from our end, what we have in the process and how we push our clients to basically do that, we ask to gather a group of test users. You don't have to invest a lot to basically acquire something like this. And this test group of users would be the potential users of the application once it's ready. So you can start getting feedback from the market, even in the process of the engineering. And following our agile methods of development of the product, we would be able to pass through a lot of cycles of feedback from the market, even before the solution is on the marketplace, which would heavily increase the chances of the solution actually being successful once it's launched and once it's ready. Third part is analytics. Again, if you're working with the audience which is sensible, you would have a more complex, a more difficult implementation in terms of the analytics. We've done a lot of telemedicine solutions. We see that a lot of clinics, they neglect the implementation of analytics or analysis of the analytics, which basically leads to the fact that their retention rates is lower, and the additional revenue stream that we're basically adding for the business through the implementation of the telemedicine is something that they cannot leverage fully, because the retention over time goes down, because they're not very cautious about the analytics and they don't work with it a lot. So we heavily basically suggest to implement analytics and login systems into the application, but login is something that you would basically have anyway, because it's the requirement which is provided by the HIPAA. So in any case, if you would want to be on the market with the solution, you would have to have login functionalities on the application, which would log the actions of the users, different entities, and how the data flows on the app. Care, that's a very interesting point, because solutions like this, users should feel that when they open the solutions like this, it's like, you know, this like warm feeling. And I would basically cover on this point a bit later when I would be speaking about the UI and UX design. But in terms of how the app works, how it looks, what type of colors are used in the UI, how the animations actually look and work on the application, what type of shapes are being used in the UI as well, and what type of the UX essentially the application has too, is heavily is basically like this care part. It is heavily like dependent on all these factors. And if the user can really feel that even the app by itself cares about the current situation by the way it's designed, that's a huge point to the retention. That's a huge save on the marketing costs. And basically retention and generation revenue from active users that are retaining from month to month is the main metric for the investors, main metric for the multipliers of the product as well, which basically pushes the solution very high and makes it very interesting. In terms of the compliances, so in terms of HIPAA, that's default in the US, we have similar compliances in other regions as well that you would have to have on a solution like this. As mentioned initially on the call, neglecting of this part would probably not end up very well once you would have users on the application. The thoroughness of how you would be approached of the organizations that actually check on the HIPAA compliance of the products would depend on the type of the product that you basically have. For example, if we would shift a bit away from like mental health care, if it's going to be something about samples of certain liquids that's coming out of humans, there the standards would be very, very high, and fines, they would be high as well. If it's like something more like digital, not like so very, very important, that's a different type of question. But at the same time, if you're focusing on a specific type of the audience, which is sensible, has a certain requirement for treatment of a certain issue, that would basically change the whole picture in terms of this compliance and in terms of the thoroughness of how you would be checked on this. Internally, we basically have a full process that we follow when essentially establishing that the solution is HIPAA compliant, both when we're building the solutions from scratch, or we also have cases where we're basically making existing solutions HIPAA compliant, and we are following this set of procedures. We even have some contacts in between audience companies because we know a lot of them. We have a lot of in-house employees of the company who are certified in terms of the HIPAA compliance as well, because often this is something that is required by the auditor that you're working for with. In terms of the standard ISO 13485, I would say that it's a very, very specific case, because the standard mostly says about medical devices and how you essentially operate with data on the software that is being connected to the medical device. We ourselves, we don't do hardware. So in terms of the hardware part, that's usually on the end of the provider of our client. In terms of this part, a lot of compliances from it might be similar to HIPAA. However, there are some things that you would have to focus on, but yeah, it's not something that you would basically often find in terms of mental healthcare software solutions. In terms of 9001 standard, that's pretty straightforward, and it's also kind of similar to HIPAA. Issues if not implemented properly. The worst one is when you're working on a solution for like 3, 4, 5, 6 months or 1 or 2 years, and then you are ready to launch. You've prepared all the marketing campaigns. You've invested into like a bunch of money into actually like prepare all different operations in the business to launch the whole thing. Then you launch and you find out that you don't have certain compliance that the product might require, or maybe there is some issue in terms of HIPAA because maybe you've decided that you do not want to do an audit, or maybe the company that you were doing an audit with missed something in the process. So the main thing is obviously fines here, and kind of blockers in the process as well, because no one basically wants to delay the process and extend the time frame of the launch, because each and every business owner would be losing money once marketing teams are basically just waiting for the solution to be compliant. So it's a very, very important part in the process as well. Hacks and pitfalls. This part is mostly connected with the data and with issues that the product might have in terms of the security, in terms of what is the integrity of the structure of the data in the solution, how the data is being communicated from one entity to another, what type of entity can access the data, and things like that. And it's obviously connected with the HIPAA compliance as well, because if you would have issues here, then you would have issues with HIPAA, then you would probably get fined. Pitfalls, it's mostly about implementation of the compliance here, because a lot of like healthcare solutions, they're not that hard from the software implementation point of view, but they're hard from the compliances part. And often, if you would be doing it with someone who has less experience in compliances part, he would basically just develop the solution, and then you would have a lot of headache with compliances, and you would have probably to find the provider like us to basically solve this part for you. In terms of the quality of the solution, so industry specific, that's as well about the standards that are present in the industry currently, and that's also depends on the generalization of the market that you're going for. Again, if it's something which is connected to existing business already, where people are dependent on the solution and they would use it anyway, then quality might go down. And it's kind of an interesting case because here you won't have to like invest a lot into like UI and UX, into marketing, the whole thing, because you probably have existing customers, or if it's an internal solution, you would have existing employees who would be using the product. But at the same time, if there are glitches and bugs on the solution, you would be losing money as well. And the business is going to lose money too, because people will wait, get frustrated, and not use the whole thing as well. If it's a general solution, like a meditation application, then that's a whole different story, whole different thing. UI and UX should be perfect, no issues at all. And that's going to be a very, very crucial point in the whole planning and development of the product. Retention rates. Retention rates is the first thing that are the first thing, I think, is the first thing that basically suffers from lack of the quality of the solution. And I see many times when clients are coming to us, they've developed a solution with someone else. They're looking to change the engineering team because they're not satisfied with the quality of the solution. And they've been running marketing campaigns for quite some time, several months. And the issue that they have is retention rates. And they try to solve it with marketing. They try to test new campaigns. They try to update the landing page. They try to like improve some overview of the application, the app store, and things like that. But really the issue is in the engineering. And often bugs and issues on the product, they can cause a lot of damages in cash that you're investing into marketing. And kind of like high quality of the solution actually optimizes the marketing budgets that you would have to invest into the product. So this is a crucial part. I always suggest to invest more into software development of the product, not like more, but a significant, nice amount, not to be cheap with it, to make sure that everything is going to be optimized with the marketing. Marketing budgets, yeah, that's the thing that grows to the moon if the solution quality is not there, and you basically invest more in trying to solve the retention issue with the marketing budget, but it's about the product. And that's why implementation of analytics is very, very important as well, because without proper analytics, you won't be able to understand that the issue is with the product actually, and you won't be able to see where users are closing the application, where they are not interested, and things like that. UI UX standards of the industry, again, if it's something for the use of existing business locally or with customers that would have to use it anyway, you might go down a bit on UI and UX, make it standard. However, the better it is, the more retention you will have as well, because we had cases where we were doing implementation of a telemedicine solution for a certain clinic, and we actually were able to make it an additional generation of patients funnel for the clinic, because people basically just liked the application and they were referring people to use the application because it basically had a nice UI and UX and felt good. Target market as well, if it's something very, very general, that's hard in terms of the UI and UX. If it's something more local and close type of system, then you might be able to invest less. Competitive advantage. UI and UX is basically like one of the very nice competitive advantages that you will be leveraged when launching and basically working on the solution as well, which many companies actually neglect, and they think like it's not so very important part and things, but this is one important point by which you can basically attract the attention to the app, and attention is basically the currency of 21st century. And in the first place, attract, and then with the proper UX and some UI elements as well, be able to improve the retention on the whole thing as well. So it definitely optimizes the marketing on the whole thing too, because like when someone sees the ad of the application with a very, very nice UI, it's a whole different conversion into click and into download than if the UI and UX is default. Data security recommendations and policies. Currently, it's basically mostly about mental health care part, and about compliances as well. Compliances to follow how they solve the issue. if you basically have proper implementation of HIPAA compliances and regulations and you're audited, then most likely you won't have issues with the data and with the security, because that's what HIPAA compliance is about. Engineering team experience as well. If you're working with someone who did not have experience in terms of HIPAA compliances and implementations or things like that, that's going to be a challenge. Data production tools and methods. If the HIPAA compliance is in place and implemented, it's going to be all right. And one of the issue is HIPAA would kind of be able to provide you with an audit where you kind of would be all right with like a small amount of users, maybe before the launch, maybe with some kind of test group and stuff. However, once the product is live and it's being used in the day-to-day operations of the business, this part might be crucial, because HIPAA might not be able to catch certain issues. That's why we basically suggest to do frequent audits, not only on the HIPAA part, but in terms of like data protection, in terms of data, in terms of how the thing flows, and as well in terms of the analytics. Check actively on the analytics that are being implemented into the product. If we have some issues in terms of data, if we have some issues how different entities are communicating on the product as well. Steps to know intelligence to avoid. Market presence for a solution. That's basically default, but that's a lot that we see specifically with mental health care as well. We've been working on several very, very interesting types of solutions, like certain implementations where kind of you're creating a mental health care app, which would basically serve as like a lead generation funnel for all the different businesses, all the different type of service providers, for people that would require different treatments of mental health care. So the idea of the project is basically you go in, you're able to do some like tests, play some small games, which kind of help you to decrease the amounts of stress, to focus on something else, to focus on a certain activity as well. And when you're basically playing the game, we would have the AI algorithm analyzing the type of actions, how you're basically operating with different type of tests and different type of games, gathering this data, and then based on this data, providing you with the solutions to basically be able to be serviced by one of the partners of the company of the client. The whole idea of the solution is very, very interesting, and with the implementation of the AI and with the interest in the AI, I think it's going to be a very, very interesting thing. It's basically a range of solutions that we were developing like this, that have kind of this type of concept in the core of the whole thing. But also there should be a market for things like that. And the great thing about these solutions, because you can develop things in stages as well, because maybe you have like 4 stages of the project planned, you've developed stage 1, you've launched, and no one cares. Data sensitivity. If we're speaking about mental health care, about treatments of certain issues, that's a crucial part of the whole thing. And basically, if you're just following HIPAA, you're audited, you have the implementations, you should be right in terms of that part. But there might be issues once you're launched, once the solution is operating already. So this is the part that we usually cover with the audits and with the implementation of analytics. Marketing budgets, don't overspend until you have analytics showing that everything is all right, and you don't have like any default issues where applications or owners of the applications or businesses that develop applications for themselves spending a lot of money on, and entities communication. Speaking about the ERM systems, or basically telemedicine, where we have different entities communicating in between each other, and the transfer of data is usually a weak point in these communications, especially where we have live streaming functionalities in telemedicine. We would have basically encryption, we would have to encrypt everything, we would have to have a good integrity of the data, good storages in terms of the architecture, structure of the whole thing. So that should be in place as well, because fines in terms of the HIPAA, which are multi-million type of fines, they would be very, very small part if actually you would have like data leaks on a nice amount of users and a nice amount of the transactions in the application. So this is pretty much it in terms of the webinar, in terms of the coverage of the topics. In terms of the offer that I was mentioning at the start of the call, in upcoming 24 hours, if you would reach out to us, my email is stan@interexy.com. I would later put it into the chat. We would send you the guide on how to develop healthcare applications, solutions, and you would basically have like the sum up of all these issues on the guide as well. So even if you have a current solution, you would be able to share it with the current engineering team just for them to have a check. Or if you would be planning to basically do one, that would be a very, very nice place to start and think of. In terms of any questions that you might have, you might just type them in the chat. We will have several more minutes where I will be able to respond to each and every of them to the best of my knowledge. If I won't be able to respond, we'll just send the response to you later on the email. Meanwhile, I would also like to share information about our referral program. So if you might have anyone who might be thinking on essentially getting a piece of software developed, or might have a need in terms of help of some engineers, add some engineers into the current existing team, feel free to contact us. We are sharing 10% of the lifetime revenue from the projects as well. We have a network of partners. Some of them, they're working with us full time. So it's a very, very nice source of income as well. So if you would have any recommendations, referrals in terms of that, we are definitely up to have a conversation. And the best thing is that we're doing all the heavy lifting for you as well. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. I think I will wait for 2 minutes more. I will type my email as well, which is stan@interexy.com. So if you would reach out, you can just send me hi, like, hi Stan, it's John from the webinar. We will share the guide with you, so it actually would be easier to approach the things like that.